This is Top Accolade Global News Updates. I am Soibifa Jakarich. Investors lulled into thinking U.S. regional banks were out of the woods after ruptures last year have been given a jolt by New York Community Bank. The under-the-radar lenders' earning reports sparked a sell-off in regional bank shares and a warning for investors that had grown inured to the sector's sensitivity to high Federal Reserve interest rates nearly a year after two banks failed. While NYCB's confluence of problems are unique to its balance sheet, elements of its earning underscored regional leaders' ongoing sensitivity to high Fed rates, which continues to squeeze commercial real estate portfolios and lending margins, investors said. That pressure will last longer than expected after the Fed held rates steady on Wednesday, prompting traders to reprice the first rate from March and into May, according to future data. NYCB's stock had plummeted 45% in 2 days, while the broader KBW Regional Banking Index has fallen more than 7% this week. The sell-off comes nearly a year after Silicon Valley Bank's March 2023 failure, when high interest rates drove paper losses on its bonds, sparking a fatal deposit run that failed Signature Bank days later. NYCB snapped up Signature Bank's assets, pushing its balance sheet over $100 billion regulatory threshold that triggers strict capital and liquidity rules. That led the bank to slash its dividend to retain cash, but NYCB also posted a $185 million loss after putting aside cash to cover two sourced loans on a cooperative and an office. Malaysia halved the jail sentence on Friday of former Premier Najib Razak, who was convicted of graft and money laundering related to the multi-billion-dollar 1MDB scandal. A move expected to raise further questions about Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's commitment to fighting graft. Anwar campaigned on an anti-corruption platform but joined hands with Najib's graft-tainted party, United Nations Malays Organization (UMNO), to form a government in November 2022. After an election that ended in a hung parliament, the reduction in Najib's sentence comes amid accusations that the Anwar administration is backsliding on reforms after a string of graft cases linked to Najib and other UMNO leaders were dropped last year. Najib, who began serving a 12-year jail term in August 2022, will be released in 2028 and fines imposed on him reduced to 50 million ringgit, that is $10.59 million from 210 million ringgit, according to a statement from the Secretariat of Malaysia's Pardons Board on Friday. The board, chaired by Malaysia's king, did not give a reason for halving Najib's sentence. It said if Najib failed to pay the fine given, an additional year would be imposed on his jail term. The Prime Minister's office and representative for Najib did not immediately respond to requests for comments. Najib has convinced for graft linked to state fund One Malaysia Development Berhad, from which US and Malaysian investigator estimate $4.5 billion was stolen and more than $1 billion channeled to accounts linked to the former premier. He applied for a royal pardon shortly after his conviction was upheld by Malaysia's highest court, making him the first premier in the country's history to be jailed. Najib has consistently denied wrongdoing, saying he was misled by fugitive financial Jolt and other 1MDB officials over the source of the funds and that he believed they were donations from the Saudi royal family. He remains on trial in several other cases linked to corruption at 1MDB. Saudi Arabia would be willing to accept a political commitment from Israel to create a Palestinian state rather than anything more binding, in a bid to get a defense pact with Washington approved before the US presidential election, three sources said. Months of US-led diplomacy to get Saudi Arabia to normalize relations with Israel and recognize the country for the first time were shelved by Riyadh in October in the face of mounting Arab anger over the war in Gaza. But Saudi Arabia is increasingly keen to shore up its security and ward off threats from rival Iran, so the kingdom can forge ahead with its ambitious plan to transform its economy and attract huge foreign investments, two regional sources said. To create some wiggle room in talks about recognizing Israel and to get the US pact back on track, Saudi officials have told their US counterparts that Riyadh would not insist Israel take a concrete step to create a Palestinian state and would instead accept a political commitment to a two-state solution, two senior regional sources said. Such a major regional deal, widely seen as a long shot even before the Israel-Hamas war, would still face numerous political and diplomatic obstacles, not least the uncertainty over how the Gaza conflict will unfold. A pact given the world's biggest oil exporter US military protection in exchange for normalization with Israel would reshape the Middle East by uniting two long-time foes and binding Riyadh to Washington at a time when China is making inroads in the region. A normalization deal would also bolster Israel's defense against arch-rival Iran and give US President Joe Biden a diplomatic victory to mount ahead of the November 5th presidential election. The Saudi officials have privately urged Washington to press Israel to end the Gaza war and commit to a political horizon for a Palestinian state, saying Riyadh would then normalize relations and help fund Gaza's reconstruction, one of the regional sources said. Japan, American closest ally in Asia, has been trying to send a message to US presidential hopeful Donald Trump. Don't try to strike any deal with China that could upend years of collective efforts to rein in Beijing and risk the region's fragile peace. Tokyo has stepped up attempts to engage with people close to Trump in recent weeks, as the 77-year-old's victory in Republican primaries in Iowa and New Hampshire have seen him emerge in some polls as the frontrunner in November's presidential election. Japan's endeavor have included dispatching a senior ruling party figure to try to meet Trump and engage by Japanese diplomats with think tanks and former US officials aligned with Trump. Three of the officials said. Top of Tokyo's worry list is that if Trump returns to power, he may seek some kind of trade or security deal between the world's top two economies that could undermine recent efforts by the group of seven G7 wealthy nations to counter China, according to the six officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the issue's sensitivity. Trump, who reached a trade agreement with Beijing in 2019 that later expired, has not mentioned any potential deal with China during his campaign for the 2024 nomination. The Japanese officials said they have no specific knowledge of Trump's plans, but they base their concerns on his public comments and actions during his 2017 to 2021 term, in which he eschewed some multilateral cooperation, defended his relationship with authoritarian leaders such as China's Xi Jinping, and unsuccessfully sought a nuclear deal with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Two Japanese foreign ministry officials said they fear that Trump may be prepared to weaken US support for nearby Taiwan in pursuit of a deal with China. They said such a move could embolden Beijing, which claims Taiwan and has not ruled out seizing the island by force. Asked in an interview with Fox News in July 2023 whether the US should have defend Taiwan if it means going to war with China, Trump said, "If I answer that question, it will put me in a very bad negotiating position. With that being said, Taiwan did take all of our ship business. We used to make our own ships. Now they are made in Taiwan." Tokyo also worries that Trump may again hit Japan with protectionist trade measures such as tariffs on steel and revive demands for it to pay more towards the cost of stationing US forces in the country, according to the six Japanese officials. Viktor Orban said on Friday that he went to the wall for his country before agreeing to an EU deal on Thursday to extend new aid to Ukraine, and that he averted the risks of losing EU funds earmarked for Budapest from the bloc's joint coffers. European Union leaders unanimously agreed on Thursday to extend 50 billion euros, that is $54 billion, in new aid to Ukraine, sending a message to the United States where a divide has opened up over whether to keep backing backing Kyiv in its fight against Russia's invasion. The agreement came surprisingly quickly after weeks of resistance from Hungary, which has refused to send weapons to Ukraine since the war started, and whose relations with Ukraine have been marred by tensions over the treatment of some 150,000 ethnic Hungarians living in western Ukraine. In a regular interview on state radio on Friday, where he addresses his domestic audience, Orban said the agreement reached on Thursday was a good one. "I went to the wall," Orban said. "If this deal had not been reached and Hungary had continued to use its right of veto, then 26 member states would have agreed to send the money to Ukraine and would have taken away the fund earmarked for Hungary and sent that to Ukraine as well. Why would that have been good?" Orban added. "We are not sending weapons to Ukraine. We get our money from Brussels and we will contribute to the civil financing of Ukraine." After freeing up access to some tranches of EU fund in December to Hungary, the European Commission is still withholding some 20 billion euros from Budapest over widespread accusation that Orban has damaged democracy at home during his 13 years in power. His government rejects these allegations. Orban reiterated that peace talk should start between Ukraine and Russia, as 2 years have now passed since the start of the war and time was on the Russian side. Orban has been a vocal critic of the EU's financial and military support for Kyiv and maintains ties with the Kremlin since Russia's invasion of neighboring Ukraine in February 2022. That is the size of top accolade global news update. You can follow us on our social media platforms as displayed on your screen. Happy Friday.